Good evening and thank you for joining us. Hong Kong Olympic gold medal winning fencer Vivian Kong made a triumphant return to the city this morning. As only the third Hong Kong athlete in history to strike Olympic gold, Kong says she will set up a charity fund so that more children can pursue their fencing dreams without being restricted financially. Vivian Kong, Hong Kong's very own fencing queen, returned home clutching the Olympic gold medal. Her sensational comeback in the women's épée final at the Paris Games, many saw as the quintessential embodiment of the Hong Kong spirit. Greeted by a rapturous welcome, she arrived at Hong Kong International Airport at around 6:30 in the morning.
Hong Kong's home. It's so good to be home, and being in Paris. I love the French people, and I spent with my French friend in the finals. But and they had a huge crowd to supporting her, and coming back, it feels like I have my crowd too. It still feels unreal. Still feels like I have to go train, but I don't have to today. So I think I'm going to try and let this sink in and then decide what's next.
Apart from thanking her parents, coaches, and supporters, she also paid tribute to her predecessors in fencing circles, who paved the way for the current crop of athletes to have more resources in training. As for the $6 million award from the Hong Kong Jockey Club, Vivian is planning to set up a charitable fund or social enterprise to share the joy of fencing among children.
High barrier of entry.
She hopes more people can have the opportunity to find the sports they enjoy, including fencing, which has a higher entry barrier.
There's just so much potential with the sports industry.
To other news, Iran's supreme leader prayed over the coffins of assassinated Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh and his bodyguard, who were killed in an airstrike in Tehran on Thursday. Israel, which had vowed to go after Hamas leaders after the October 7th attacks, has not commented on the incident. Haniyeh's death raises fears of escalation in the Middle East amid the war in Gaza, after Israel killed a senior Hezbollah leader during a rare strike on the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Nasri Karim with more.
The target, the timing, and Tehran. Three factors in Ismail Haniyeh's assassination that have raised the stakes to dangerously high levels in the Middle East. The target being the influential political leader of Palestinian group Hamas, who was part of ceasefire talks. Thousands attended funeral prayers for Haniyeh in Tehran, from where his body will be flown to Lusail in Qatar for burial. The timing was hours after the inauguration of Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, for which Haniyeh was an invited guest, and Tehran, where the missile attack took place, scoring a direct hit at Haniyeh's residence. Iran is furious that the attack took place on its soil, killing our dear guest in our own home. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who attended funeral prayers, said it was Iran's duty to exact revenge with the harshest of punishments. Israel is being blamed, though the Israelis have not claimed responsibility and have yet to comment on the incident. Observers say Haniyeh's death is a blow to ceasefire talks. The United States is scrambling to prevent escalation.
We don't believe that an escalation is inevitable, and there's no signs that an escalation is imminent. But I also said that we watch it very, very closely. I also said, and said again today, that this is something that we've been concerned about since the 7th of October.
At an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, China condemned the attack on Tehran, but no collective message was issued by the body. Nasri Karim, TVB News.
3 days on from the Venezuelan presidential election, and the winner has still not been resolved. President Nicolas Maduro was declared the winner, but his main challenger, Edmundo Gonzalez, backed by opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, says he obtained more than 2/3 of the vote. Gonzalez and Machado say the data shows Maduro lost the election. Tracy Furness has more.
Motorcycles passing through a Caracas neighborhood, blaring their horns to protest against the election results. Scuffles with police on the streets. And this protester burns a poster of President Maduro's election propaganda. People of Venezuela are making it clear how they feel about the election as Maduro is declared the winner.
After some initial protests on the streets, there have been several requests to President Maduro to release detailed vote counts.
The opposition says it obtained more than 2/3 of the tally sheets that each electronic voting machine printed after the polls closed. Maduro insisted that there had been a plot against his government, that the electoral system was hacked, and protests targeted the offices of the National Electoral Council.
On Wednesday, President Maduro said that he has requested the Supreme Court to do an audit of the presidential election results. But almost immediately, some foreign observers said that this court is too close to the government to produce an independent review.
The opposition has not said anything yet about Maduro's request to the court. But when asked if he would accept a redo of the election, Maduro said that was not an option. The EU called for transparency and said it will not recognize the results of the election until independent verification of the records can be made.
Allow me to add that the opposition has made available to the public, as published, in a web page which is publicly available, a set of data coming from these electoral acts, records, that offers a completely different result from the one announced by the Venezuelan authorities. That's an additional reason for not recognizing the results until they will be fully and independently verified.
Venezuela's neighbors are also weighing in on the Venezuelan election. Henry Kronfall, president of the Ecuadorian National Assembly, asserted if the election is not subject to transparency, the government will become a dictatorship. Kronfall criticized the transparency of the process, citing the opposition of not being allowed to verify through an open electoral system. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has left its benchmark overnight interest rate unchanged at the 5.25% to 5.5% range amid cooling inflation. When asked whether this paves the way for a rate cut, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell told reporters that the Fed has made no decisions about future meetings. However, Powell noted the broad sense of the Federal Reserve's committee is the U.S. economy is moving closer to the point at which it will be appropriate to reduce its policy rate. He said if inflation continues to cool, a rate cut could be on the table at the Fed's September meeting. Still ahead, a plea deal for 3 suspects in the 9/11 terror attacks. Feeding wild pigeons, now an illegal act. And 17 people arrested in a police crackdown on fraud syndicates. Welcome back. The U.S. Defense Department announced Wednesday that the man accused of masterminding the September 11, 2001 terror attacks on America and 2 of his accomplices have agreed to plead guilty. The attacks claimed nearly 3,000 lives. Officials say under the agreement, they will be spared the death penalty. Danny Zhou has more.
According to a Pentagon statement, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 2 of his accomplices, Walid bin Attash and Mustafa al-Hawsawi, have agreed to plead guilty regarding their alleged involvement in the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. They face a litany of charges including conspiracy, attacking civilians, hijacking, and terrorism. Mohammed, a US-educated engineer who became al-Qaeda's operational planner, was captured in Pakistan in 2003. Prosecutors argued it was Mohammed that proposed to Osama bin Laden the plot of flying hijacked commercial planes into the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon building in Washington, D.C. He also allegedly helped recruit and train some hijackers. The U.S. had tried to seek the death penalty for Mohammed, but the trial for Mohammed and his co-conspirators stalled for over 2 decades due to the legal issues related to the torture used against them in prison. The suspects are being detained at the U.S. military prison in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. After 27 months' negotiations, they agreed to plead guilty to all charges in the pretrial agreement, which reportedly involved a guilty plea in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. The three men are expected to enter pleas as soon as next week. Republicans condemned the plea deal, calling it the Biden administration's cowardice in the face of terror. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said the move was a revolting abdication of the government's responsibility to defend America and provide justice. Families of the victims, who waited 23 years for a trial to press for the highest penalty for the suspects, were utterly disappointed. It also came at a time when the families were presenting newly unsealed evidence to the court, which they say links Saudi Arabia's government to 9/11 attacks.
I'm deeply disappointed that they chose to do a plea deal at all, especially knowing that this information and all of this evidence has not seen the light of day. They try to bury what we're doing, bury our story, make us not important.
It is reported that the surviving victims and victims' families have the opportunity to testify on the 9/11 attacks' impacts on them during the sentence hearing. Prosecutors will also meet the families in person later this year to discuss the plea agreements. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Chief Executive John Lee today met Vietnamese President To Lam as he continued his visit to 3 countries in the ASEAN. The two leaders met at the presidential palace in Hanoi this afternoon. The Vietnamese president said the country respects and supports the one country, two systems principle and Hong Kong's rule of law. The president also said John Lee's visit is an important milestone in enhancing relations. Lee meanwhile said he was excited about the meeting because it carries a symbolic meaning. The first visit by a CE to Vietnam since the city's return to Chinese sovereignty. In the morning, Lee met the Deputy Prime Minister of Vietnam, Tran Lu Truong, and witnessed the signing ceremony for 8 memoranda. The police have busted 2 fraud syndicates and arrested 17 people. A total of $27 million was involved. One of the syndicates was suspected to have carried out fraud by impersonating mainland officials. The police arrested 11 men and 1 woman on Monday, aged between 19 and 62, and seized a batch of counterfeit documents, police warrants, and mainland police certificates. The syndicate was involved in 11 fraud cases involving $26 million. The other fraud syndicate was allegedly responsible for the Guess Who I Am fraud cases last month, where they called elderly citizens at random, pretending to be their children or friends, and claimed to be in urgent need of money. The police said there has been an increasing trend in fraud cases in which scammers pretend to be mainland officials. Today is the 97th anniversary of the establishment of the People's Liberation Army. A flag-raising ceremony was held by the Chinese People's Liberation Army forces in Hong Kong and Central. At around 6:30 a.m., 78 members of the PLA in Hong Kong escorted the national flag to a military pier in Central. The flag-raising ceremony was watched by more than 200 spectators, including representatives of the PLA and their family. And a look at Friday's weather before we go. Very hot with sunny periods and some showers. Temperatures will range between 28 and 33 degrees Celsius. The hot weather is here to stay over the weekend. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.